What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Cording. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I have a lot of good to say about Blizzard lately. I've been having a blast. I now have a level 6 character in WoW Classic called the Sorcerer. If you see me out there, say hi. I've been having a blast with WoW Classic, a great example of a company listening to the fandom. And I really hope that they reap a lot of rewards for that because, well, I want to encourage that from more companies. I also reported on some of the bad news where they had laid off about 800 people a while ago, and while still hiring, the optics weren't great. The optics weren't great in terms of coming on the tail end of reporting record earnings at Activision King Blizzard, things like this. But there's some new news coming out today, and I'm thinking because these layoffs are hitting Versailles now, they're hitting the European offices, as well as some news on their, quote, shameful social plan. So let's see what's going on. So the staff cuts announced by Blizzard at the beginning of the year were also going to hit the publisher's French headquarters. I remember reporting that at the time, with layoffs that will affect 134 people. Blizzard's preparing to carry out, they sound like this public hanging here. Carry out 134 layoffs that will hit Blizzard Entertainment SAS, the French publisher's headquarters located in Versailles. The personnel cut is in the perspective of a restructuring announcing that the company, after the beginning of this year, which involved 800 people, and which the French unions have widely criticized because of the contrast between these measures and record collections declared by the company last year with net profit 1.6 billion euros. See, this is what I'm talking about. It's optics. See, in the US, you lay someone off, you don't even have to give them a severance. You can just send them out the door. When you go over to Europe, they have better, in some ways, protections for employees. And so layoffs there are much more complicated. That's why months later, it feels like we're finally getting the news breaking about France. In short, trade unions argue that the size of the redundancies does not correspond to the current situation of Blizzard's European division, and several positions have simply been relocated to obtain, quote, economic advantages. Again, saying you're just trimming fat. We don't like that. The concern of the staff that will keep their place in Blizzard Entertainment SAS also clearly concerns the greater burden of tasks that will be determined by the 30% cut in workforce, meaning we've cut 30% of our staff, and how are we going to pick all that up? So an interesting development. It looks like just laying off. It's crazy to me as an American. I mean, companies lay off hundreds of people all the time, and there's never any real pushback. There's always one or two of these people that sue for, age discrimination or something like that. But it's super, super rare to see any real pushback. Even when Activision Blizzard did it in the first place, I've been on the record saying that I do not like the recycling of employees. Staffing up for big releases and then just trimming everybody during the downtimes. But unfortunately, that's the nature of software development. You can only keep so many people on. And it's easy for us to point and say, boy, they're making so much money. They should make less money and employ more people. But really, that's not our place. We're not the owner of the company. This is a private corporation or private company. Actually, they're not private. They're publicly held. So they answer to shareholders. And as greedy as it sounds, obviously, when you have record profits and you're laying off hundreds of people, at the end of the day, when you get into game development, and again, I feel for the people. I don't want to seem callous. I do. It stinks. And the thing is, you could reduce this with better project management and better planning. What happens is, I believe, at a lot of these companies, middle management is grossly underskilled and underdeveloped and inexperienced because of the flat-out churn of everything. They're obviously rewarding the wrong type of people if they can't properly estimate what they're going to need. Yes, a lot of times budgets get wonky and that happens, but I think that there is some responsibility of these corporations to do a little bit better job planning. Not a responsibility, but it would be nice if you didn't have these huge waves of hiring and cutting going on all the time. Then you see this article, which is originally in French, so there may be some mistranslation, although I think it looks pretty reasonable. Blizzard Entertainment announces shameful social plan. That is obviously editorialized. While Activision Blizzard King Group reports record profits, again, building the narrative, okay? Blizzard Entertainment SAS, the French subsidiary managing the distribution of Blizzard games in the European market, announces the elimination of 134 jobs, 1/3 of the company's workforce, through a job protection plan. Activision Blizzard brings together 3 companies that develop and edit successful video games such as Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, Diablo, and Overwatch, Candy Crush. The group listed on NASDAQ is the world's largest video game publisher and had a net profit of $1.8 billion. In addition to these record results, Activision Blizzard King is a solid finance company, an operating margin equivalent to that of the luxury industry. EBITDA up 25%. I remember looking at EBIT data over 10 years. Very high cash, negative debt account. So they're in great shape is what they're saying. After 15 years of very strong growth, the share price fell at the end of 2018, the announcement of the departure of Mike Morhaime and the vocal dissatisfaction of the community of players, the announcement of the development of a mobile game under the Diablo license. Now, again, people weren't mad that there would be a mobile game that existed. People were mad that their expectations were a new Diablo game after waiting many years, and then we got Diablo Immortal. If you look at how the Elder Scrolls people did it, you announce the new game's coming, and then in the meantime, here's a mobile app. You're not going to get that kind of backlash. I mean, anybody could have predicted that, especially announcing at BlizzCon, where it's a large percentage of your employees, attendees are hardcore PC gamers. So they go on. In addition to the number of jobs eliminated, which does not correspond to the quantified need, again, that seems editorialized, nor to an effect and relevant or reorganization of the services of the European office, which we want to see reduced. The measures proposed by management are scandalously inefficient, notably on the financial measures component, a culmination of the leading group industry. Currently, the amount of financial compensation is of the order of the minimum imposed by French law. So I'm assuming what they mean is their severance packages are minimum. And it is expected to be found in the place of small businesses suffering from genuine financial difficulties. This is not the Blizzard Entertainment SAS, which has the good luck to forget the same law specifies that these amounts must be proportionate to the financial means of an international group. So essentially, what they're saying here is Blizzard is offering their employees the bare minimum severance package, which is kind of crummy. I always thought that, you know, when I've done layoffs, we did 6 weeks minimum. Some employees got like 15 weeks severance. I know if a company's just in horrible shape, you can't do that. But I think they're arguing here that Blizzard has plenty of cash and you're giving your employees the absolute bare minimum. Where if you compare that to what it's like in the United States, okay, you're not required to have any severance. My mother-in-law worked for a company for over 20 years. And they downsized, handed her cardboard box, and sent her on her way. No notice, no severance, no nothing. And there's really nothing she could do about it. And I suppose requiring severance is ridiculous. You can't do that. That's why we have in the United States an unemployment program where people who suddenly lose their jobs can replace some small percentage of that income in the short term. But I digress. Similarly, training measures also imposed by law are below market standards, preventing the effective conversion of employees on departure. The aim of the French-style economic dismissal is to allow jobs to be safeguarded at all costs, be it within the country, in difficulty within companies that are group, or through a professional reconversion that is only allowed if employees have the opportunity to fund quality certifying training. So it looks like the French government is also requiring that to lay off these 134 people, you're going to have to provide them some post-employment training. I'm not sure why you'd have a company in France. I mean, if you're a super mega big corporation and you want to lay people off, this seems like a real demotivator Finally, it is untenable to hear that the management has not provided any support for the employees who will remain with the company, nor any study concerning the increased workload of these, a legitimate expectation, and here also a legal obligation in job protection plans. So again, it seems like all three of these things may be foreign to like people in the United States, like the idea of like you must pay to have your employees retrained, you must give them some set amount of severance package that is also apparently negotiable. You must retrain them. You must. All these things are things that are imposed by the government. And to be honest with you, Blizzard knew that going in, I assume. And they really, it seems like such a stingy move on their part. You have plenty of money. You should be, providing. Hey, little lady. My cat agrees. You should be providing more than the bare minimum in terms of severance packages, just from a PR standpoint. I'm not saying they should have to be able to do that legally. Legally, they're doing what they're required to do, but the amount of training and the payout probably needs to improve from just a PR perspective. Again, the headlines will read, this title will read, lays off another 30% of employees, shameful social plan, all sorts of things like that, which will just be bad PR for Blizzard at a time which I should be talking about good things like WoW Classic, which has been a blast. If you're in the beta, let me know. We can team up. Or I've also reactivated my regular Blizzard account to play because it was a tough decision, to be honest with you, because just like with the Sonic movie redesign, I wanted to and felt like I must support the company for listening to their fans. My differences with Blizzard aside, there are many things they do that I don't like, particularly Activision is really the worst offender in my opinion, but also wanting to support customer-forward practices like giving us WoW Classic. For Sonic, I probably wouldn't have saw Sonic opening weekend, but now that they've committed to redesigning Sonic for the fandom, it's like I have to go because you have to positively enforce this behavior. I'm hoping that Blizzard just, they need to do what's fair here. Clearly, there's a legal minimum for them, but I think just doing what's fair and moving on with your life is better than having endless articles and endless videos talking about evil mega corporation. Instead, we could just talk about how awesome WoW Classic is. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.